Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing well. Can we just take a minute to talk about how late this video is and how sorry I am this video is so late, but I haven't had the opportunity to film it any sooner and I didn't want to not film it because I thought this would be quite an interesting video because I've missed my last wrap-up video. So if you didn't know, this is my March and April wrap-up. For some reason, I failed to do a wrap-up at the end of March. I don't know if I was even back on YouTube properly. I can't even remember where I was at. And I only read 4 books and I thought there's no point doing a whole video just on those 4 books. Why didn't I add it onto my April wrap-up? And then we got to the end of April and I didn't have the opportunity because I was doing the 24-hour reading challenge over that weekend, and then the weekend after that I had like a jam-packed weekend, and this is the first time I've had to sit down and record it. So I'm just going to record it today. I'm going to record it in one take. It's going to go straight up onto YouTube. I'm sorry it's late, you're welcome. And can we just talk about also the fact that the first book I'm going to tell you, which is a book that I finished in the beginning of March, it feels like I read this so long ago. So if I don't give you very cohesive thoughts on these books, some of them is because it was just a little while ago that I read them, and I'm sorry it's late, and I do want to get better at doing kind of wrap up and TBR videos. So the next one, I promise it's not as late as this. So let's start with the March reads first. Like I said, March wasn't a very good reading month for me. I only read 4 books. The first book I read was Days of Blood and Starlight by Laini Taylor, and I really enjoyed this. I've really been enjoying the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy so far. I enjoyed the first one, I enjoyed this one. This one felt like a chonk, like to hold, but actually it read really, there's something about Laini Taylor's writing, it read really easy, and I kind of flew through it. And I think I also might have listened to the audiobook of this as well. I really do like the audiobooks. And it just didn't seem like a difficult read at all, but I really enjoyed the development in the worlds in this one, and I'm really intrigued to read the 3rd and final book in this trilogy and see how the story all wraps up. But this is a second book, so I'm not going to spoil the story, but it is something I definitely recommend. And if you're a Sarah J Maas fan and you haven't read any Laini Taylor, it's somebody that I always recommend to people to pick up her writing and to pick up her books, because I feel like their writing is quite similar, in the sense of they're both really readable, if that makes sense. I don't know. I really enjoy Laini Taylor's writing, and like I say, really looking forward to finishing off this series. I've stacked these piles up on my desk and now have nowhere to put these books once I've talked about them. That's really good, isn't it? The next book I read was The Good People by Hannah Kent. This is about a rural island in 1825, and 3 women are trying to save what they believe is a changeling, a child that has been overtaken by a changeling, which is an idea, like a sort of fairy idea, that they come and they take a child away, and in its place they leave like an ailing child. It's quite an old sort of Celtic, it's also discussed in Outlander as well, so it's an old sort of like belief. I read this as the first book for my real life in-person book club that I went to. I enjoyed it and it was really interesting, but there was just something really kind of like ndri about it, which is a Scottish term, kind of like dreary, because it was set in Ireland. It was very atmospheric. There was just something about it that was quite heavy, but what was really interesting was that it's actually based on a real trial that happened, which I thought was really interesting. Something that I would not necessarily like go out of my way to recommend. I think when I discussed it, I scored it 3 out of 5 with the I don't rate books, as you may or may not know, but when we were discussing it, we score them at the book club, and yeah, this one I gave a 3. It's not the most amazing book I've ever read, but I would be intrigued to see more of Hannah Kent's work, because she did kind of weave this really atmospheric setting, and yeah, I enjoyed it. Not the best thing ever, but I enjoyed it. The next book I read, as I'm going to drop everything, I'm just going to put that one up there. That's going to be really annoying, isn't it? I'm not going to put that out there. Was Throne of Glass by Sarah J Maas. If you watched my series read-along announcement on the Daisy and Bee Book Club on Facebook, we're doing a series read-along for Throne of Glass, which I'm hosting, and then Daisy May is doing the series read-along for The Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. We read the first book, which I have read before, but read it absolutely eons ago and couldn't tell you really much of anything that happened in it. I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed getting back into a Sarah J Maas world. And what was really interesting was that as I was reading along, it was like, oh yeah, I remember this. Oh yes, and it was really an enjoyable read. It's not her best work ever, and I'm looking forward to, we've just had the discussion for the second book, so we're going to be going into the third. I'm going to be going into the third book quite soon, which is where I've been told that that's when her writing kind of progresses. So I'm really looking forward to getting a bit further through the series. It, like I said, it's not her best work ever, but it was a good start, and it's a good basis for the characters, I think, and I'm looking forward to see where they go and where the series takes them. And then the final book that I read in March was The Last Thing to Burn by Will Dean. This I actually tabbed, and I read this as part of another in-person real life book club, because I don't know if I've mentioned this, but I've managed to get myself signed up to two. This is something very, very different from what I'd normally read. Completely different to kind of like a normal read for me. It's a thriller. It's about a woman who is kind of being held trapped in a farm in Norfolk, I think, and it's basically her story. Her husband calls her Jane. That is not her name, and basically it's about this woman, and we learn a little bit about where she comes from and her heritage. There's trigger warnings for like abuse and kind of human trafficking and things in this. I would check the trigger warnings out before going ahead and reading it. Really, really impactful, really, really powerful, and this actually made my top book for the month. So every month I choose a top book, and this made the top list. It was something that was very, very different from my normal reads, which I'm really enjoying from my book clubs, being kind of like reading something different. And yeah, I'm interested to read more from this author as well, because we all discussed in the book club discussion how authentically he wrote from a female perspective as well, and how genuine and how authentic that felt. So I'll be really intrigued. I think this author lives in, I want to say something like Sweden. Yeah, he lives in rural Sweden, and I think he's written another series that's kind of set in Sweden in a very similar setting probably to where he lives. So I'd be really intrigued to read more from this author, and I think I might even put some of his work on my wish list already. Now, going into April, at the end of March, like I said, I didn't have a great reading month. I was a bit slumpy. I read 4 books, which is still a great achievement, don't get me wrong. I'm still really pleased that I managed to read 4, and it's better than nothing. But I was massively inspired when we had a discussion for probably Throne of Glass, and Lucy, who's a member of our book club, but also is on Instagram, Loose Loves Literature. She told us that she'd finished 30 books in March, and I think I talked about this elsewhere in another video, but I couldn't tell you which video it was. And I was massively inspired by her to get my reading on and to do some more reading than I had been. So I was like, well, 30 is just not viable for me. I can't quite hit 30, but maybe I can hit, and I was thinking, no, I don't think I could quite do 15. I tell you what, I was like, I'm going to set myself to read 10, because that's still 6 books more than what I read the month before, and still an amazing achievement for me. So I challenged myself to read 10 books in April. So this is how it went. The first book I read was Gallant by V.E. Schwab. Got this gorgeous signed edition from Waterstones, which was very, very expensive, and I have to admit, I was shocked when I picked it up at how short it was. I don't really know how I feel about Gallant, and I'll be honest. I really, really enjoyed The Invisible Life of Ali LaRue, and if I was comparing it to that, I would say this was a bit of a letdown for me, but I don't think they're really very comparable, because they're extremely different, completely different stories in my opinion. So I don't think it's fair to compare them. I enjoyed it, but I found myself not being completely hooked by it, and it was quite a short book, and I seem to remember it taking me quite a while to read. So yeah, I want to revisit the Shades of Magic series by V.E. Schwab, because I've read the first one, but I do want to reread that and then carry on and read the rest of the trilogy, because I want to read more of Schwab's work. I really, really enjoyed The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and I want to give something else by her a go before kind of making a overarching kind of, yeah, statement about her writing. The second book I read was Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. As I said, we're doing a series read along on the Daisy and Bee book club. I really enjoyed this. I thought it was a really good start to the series. I was really intrigued. I love the idea of having sort of like reds and silvers. So this is set in a world where the reds are commoners and the silver-blooded people, it's all about their blood, red-blooded people, and then silver-blooded people. And the silvers are the elites, and they kind of have these powers in their blood. And this is about a main character called Mare, and yeah, she finds that actually she has a talent herself, but she's a red, and it kind of all goes from there. I enjoyed the setting of the world and the kind of build-up of the world, and I enjoyed the characters in this one, and I thought it was well paced as well, and I really enjoyed it. And I have just finished the second book, but I won't talk about that in this video. But looking forward to the rest of the series, and it's really quite nice reading some YA fantasy again. And kind of getting back into that. The next book I read was After I Do by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Now I just have to say and have to preface this with Taylor Jenkins Reid has the ability to make me feel so rubbish whilst I'm reading books, but in a really like cathartic and good way. Like I genuinely felt true sorrow for these characters, and I felt like it kind of brought me down a little bit, like emotionally and mentally when I was reading it. But I think that really goes to show how amazing their writing is. After I Do is about two characters, Lauren and Ryan. They've been married since college. Well, they've been together since college. They've been married, and they just get to a point where they start not really liking each other anymore, and they decide to take a year apart. And it's kind of all about we kind of have like these chapters that kind of lead us up to them deciding that they have to make a change. So you kind of get some of the past and kind of like how they used to be, and then how they, you can kind of see their relationship sort of deteriorate, and then you kind of get this time where they're spending time apart. It was really, really, really good, and another read that just solidifies that Taylor Jenkins Reid is just an auto-buy author for me, and I want to read all of their work. Really, really enjoyed this, even though it made me feel really depressed. I think it just goes to show how clever words can be put together to really make that feeling sort of resonate with you, and it really struck a chord. So that it wouldn't be for everybody. If you kind of if kind of breakups and sort of breakdowns of relationships is a trigger for you, then I wouldn't recommend it. But it really like pulled at my heartstrings. The next book I read was for the prompt that we had in April to read a book in a different format to normal. So we're kind of trying to push people out of their comfort zones a little bit and read something a little bit different. I don't read a lot of non-fiction, so I actually picked up The Prison Doctor by Dr. Amanda Brown, and this was actually very kindly gifted to me a couple of Christmases ago by Leah, so thank you very much, Leah, for this. It wasn't quite what I was expecting, and I did kind of finish reading this book and kind of feel like I wanted a little bit more from it. It was a quick read, and it was really insightful what I did read, but I just felt there was something lacking, and I felt like it ended a little bit abruptly. I don't know if it's ended in a way that makes me want to pick up the next books, because I think there's a couple more books written by Dr. Amanda Brown. I don't know if it makes me want to pick them up enough, but it was really insightful, it was really interesting, and yeah, I'm glad I read it. I am glad I read it. And then following on with that, I also then read next Memories of Heaven, which is by Dr. Wayne W. Dyer and D. Gons. I read a book a little while ago all about reincarnation, and it was written by a journalist that was working alongside and travelling alongside a scientist that works very, very closely with the idea of reincarnation, past lives and everything like that. And at the time I read that, I really enjoyed it, and this kept cropping up on like recommended reads, and I bought it because I was intrigued to read more about children's astounding recollections of the time before they came to Earth. And I was really, really, really intrigued. And then when I started reading it, it became very clear that it wasn't quite what I was expecting, because it was basically it is just apart from it being kind of categorized into different sorts of examples, it is basically just people that have written in to them with anecdotes about things that their children have done or said or whatnot, or themselves that they remember clearly. And it kind of, I don't know, it kind of made me think they've just put loads of people's comments together and put it into one book. Some of it was really interesting, some of it was like, oh my gosh, but some of it was just a bit like, is that real? Like, I don't know. I was a bit bit of a skeptic reading it, and yeah, it's a collection of basically people. Like I say, it's set into, the first one is Memories of Heaven, the second chapter is Memories of Past Lives. Some of the sort of the kind of things, the stories that they were telling and recollecting, memories of choosing parents. Some of them are really interesting, but it got a little bit samey because lots of people were writing in about anecdotes that were very, very similar. But also they're anecdotes. There's no real science behind it. I don't know. It was okay. It got very, very samey, and it took quite a while for me to read because I just didn't really want to pick it up. But there we go. The next book I read, on a more lighter, more positive note, was Meet Me in Tahiti by Georgia Toffolo. This is the third book in the Meet Me series, and I've buddy read all of them so far with Daisy May, and we really enjoy them. I kind of struggling to kind of decompartmentalize them from each other. They've kind of become like one big book in my head. I enjoyed Zoe as a character because Zoe is in a wheelchair. The series is based around a group of 4 women. They're friends. They've been friends forever. They all come from the same village, and they're all involved in a car accident, I think sort of like on their prom night or in a sort of equivalent to that. And Zoe's one of the ones that's left with some sort of like lifelong ramifications of that, and she's in a wheelchair. So I was really intrigued to see this sort of side of that portrayed, because the first book, one of the characters has another health condition which is discussed, and like I said, a ramification from the accident, and the previous one, who was that? Marley, Meet Me in Hawaii. She had a lot of emotional kind of effects from everything that's happened to her, and it was really interesting to see kind of a physical side of it as well, if that makes sense. I didn't love it, and I felt it was quite similar of a setting to Hawaii. But I did enjoy having Zoe's perspective, and it was light, it was fluffy. And when I say it was light, it was fluffy, it was an easy read. I enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the series. Well, the last book in the series, Meet Me at the Wedding. I've got it on my desk waiting to read it with Daisy. The next book I read, I can't remember why I picked this up, is A Year and a Day by Virginia Henley. I think I picked it up because it's a mass market paperback, so it's small and the writing's really big. This is one of the books that kind of comes up when you Google and look for lists of books that are like Outlander. This is set in Scotland, and we have a couple, Lynx and what's her name? Jane. They're handfast, and handfasting is an old sort of Scottish kind of ceremony where within a year and a day, if once you've been handfast, you can then get married, but any babies that you have whilst you're handfast are legitimate children. Kind of gives you the option of having a little bit of fun times without it being frowned upon. But if no children come from it, or you change your mind at the end of a year and a day, it doesn't matter, the handfast ceases to exist. You don't necessarily have to get married. It's basically just a bit of a smutty romance about that, really. Not quite Outlander standards. Had a sort of like mystical element to it. The main character Jane had some sort of like qualities of like healing, and it was really interesting. Like that sort of side, it was interesting, and it was nice to see another side of it. There was a lot of politics, Plantagenet politics, and like royal sort of like soldiering, and a lot of that was quite dense. I think the first like 100 pages I was like, oh my god, like this is not what I was expecting. It was really, really heavy at the beginning, but then that kind of like faded out a bit, so that wasn't great. But it is a really old book. This was first published in 1998, so it's an old book, and I think you can kind of feel that from it. But it was a book to kind of add to the list that I thought was going to be a relatively quick and easy read, and it was another one off the books like Outlander sort of like shelf that I've got going on. Where is it? There, you can't see it, it's hidden. The next book that I read was Crown of Midnight by Sarah J Maas, the next book in the Throne of Glass series. I'm not going to talk about what this is about so much because it's the second book in the series. I don't want to be spoilers, but I was intrigued to see how this was going to go, and I was pleased to see that it's kind of picked straight up. Again, this is the only other one that I have already previously read. I've only read the first two before, so it was interesting to read it and kind of again have sort of like, oh yeah, that's what happened. There's a couple of characters in here or things in here which I think were just very like they were put there for just being put there and for ease of the story. This did really feel like for me like a bridge between the first book and the third book, and it was like Sarah J Maas had to get the characters into a certain point, and this book just had to be the kind of like perfunctory, like this is how we're going to get it to work, and kind of felt more of like a placeholder than actually much going on. Seems to be a bit of a theme at the moment that second books in the series aren't gelling with me very much. It was still good and I still enjoyed it, and I was interested to see how the characters got on, but it wasn't my favourite. I preferred Throne of Glass to this one. And the next book that I read was All My Mothers by Joanna Glenn. This was when I tabbed, and this was for a in real life book club pick. I really, sorry, my door's banging in the wind. Really enjoyed this, and this also tipped my favourite book of the month. So both March and April, the books that I chose as my favourite books of the month were book club books that I would not have chosen myself. This is about Eva Martinez Green. She's an only child, and she's got lots and lots of questions about where she comes from. There's a section of her life that she feels is missing, and she wants answers. And she has an emotionally absent mother, and she has a physically absent father. And this story spans decades of Eva's life, and I'm going to talk about another book next that I read which was kind of similar, and I'm going to talk about why I enjoyed this one. But this kind of at no point left me feeling like, oh, I didn't feel like we got enough there, or it felt like, yes, okay, it spanned a long period of time, but I feel like we had everything we needed as a reader. I thought Eva's sort of like growth and her story arc and her development as a character was really important, and the overarching thought and sort of theme of who a mother really is, and that maybe we have several mothers, and that a mother isn't just necessarily a biological person that gives birth to you and then is your sole caregiver, that there's lots of other people that can fall into the mother category as well. And I really enjoyed this, and there was loads and loads of really lovely quotes. There was one quote about one of their teachers. So it starts when they're like, this character Eva's at school, like first goes to school, and one of their teachers has cancer, or their mum has cancer, and they have to like they leave basically, and they go home, each go home, and her and her friend Bridget go home and talk about cancer. And Bridget comes in the next day and says that she spoke to her dad about it, and she said that so Bridget recollects that her dad said, just because we know there are wasps about, it doesn't stop us going on a picnic. Enjoy the picnic, my dad said, and if a wasp comes along, we'll swat it away together. I just thought there was just several sort of like quotes from it that I really loved and kind of really like resonated with me, and I just really loved this. And the next book that I read, sorry, this is really annoying that they're stacking up there, isn't it, was for my other book club, and is My Name is Lucy Barton by Elizabeth Strout. Sorry, I was reading that back to front. Elizabeth Strout. So this is kind of has a similar theme to All My Mothers. This is about Lucy Barton. She's in hospital recovering from an operation, and she hasn't seen her mother in years, and her mother comes and sits by her bedside for like a period of like a week or something like that, for several days. And they kind of recollect memories from childhood, and it's from Lucy's perspective, and you kind of get these sort of like retrospective. She's like looking back at the past about the things that have happened. There's like an unspoken sort of kind of theme of abuse and things that maybe happened to Lucy as a child that you know, weren't very nice, but nothing's actually ever explicitly said. Whereas this book kind of left me feeling like I was fulfilled and I had everything I needed. This book left me just feeling like there were gaps, and I kind of felt that maybe this was a bit too literary for me. And at times I thought, am I intelligent enough to read this? Like, I just don't really get it, and I just felt the whole time that there was something missing and that I was lacking something from it. So if you have read this, please enlighten me. I actually unfortunately missed the book club discussion on it because I've been so ill again. So I didn't go to the meeting. I didn't think it was fair to go to someone's house and like cough and sneeze all over them. So I stayed at home. I sent my thoughts in via email, but I don't know what everyone else thought. I scored this one 2 out of 5. I read it and it was a short, sharp read. Sharp? It wasn't sharp. It was a short read, snappy read. But wasn't amazing and not left me no long lasting thoughts other than was I not intelligent enough to read it? That is the thought it's left me with. And then finally, now if my calculation's right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. My 11th book that I read in April was The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. Now, I'm not going to talk about this too much because I read this in my 24-hour reading challenge. So if you want to know more about my thoughts on it, go and watch that video. But I read this in a whole day, pretty much, and it was really, really great to get on the final day of April another book in, and an 11th book in of the month. I smashed my target of reading 10 books, and I got this one in. This is a sort of like, is this classed as Grumpy Sunshine? Sort of romance, set in a theme park called Dreamland, which is synonymous with kind of like Disney. And it's about 2 people that are basically trying to, Zara, she's trying to create new things for the park. She's kind of put in the kind of creation side, and Rowan, who is going to potentially be able to become the director, and he's after his granddad's death. So it's a romance. It was a little bit spicy. I enjoyed it. And like I say, it was great to get another book in and read 11 books in April. So I haven't set myself any goals. If you've watched my May TBR, you'll know that I'm doing Mood Read May. But I've read some polarizing books, and I've read a contrast of books, but I'm really pleased that I've got a balance of genre, of size, of how long it's been on my shelf, and some new and some library books, and I feel like I had a really, really good reading month in April, and I'm hoping that it will continue into May as well. So like I say, sorry this video is so late and sorry it's so long, but I hope you enjoyed this one. Have you read any amazing books in the last couple of months that you'd like to tell me about? If so, please leave me a comment down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!